So this is Judy Ward, and she's going to tell us how she got into bats. Totally by accident, yes?
Totally by accident. Well, actually, no, I was born into them. I was born in Fiji, and when I was very little, I had a bed that was just inside a window with a mango tree on the outside of the window. So some of my very early memories are flying foxes feeding in the mango tree outside my bedroom window and me talking to them in baby talk. And as you know, with flying foxes, they become accustomed to you. And there were 2 or 3 flying foxes that used to not fly away when I sat up in bed and talked to them, but stayed and talked back to me. And I would imagine they were probably Pteropus tonganus or something. They were different species from the ones we have here. But they triggered my interest in flying foxes, which was reawakened many years later when I met them here on the north coast. So I had friends who were in wires, and I thought they were a bit soft-headed because their whole lives suddenly became involved with wild animals. And I had a friend who used to leave bagged snakes in my bathtub so I could keep them cool till he finished work and things like that. And they wore me down eventually, and I agreed to join wires and do a bit of typing for them now and again. No animal care, just typing, because, you know, that was a skill I could contribute. Then I met flying foxes. But taking a step back, I did my very first flying fox rescue years before wires even existed. My mother-in-law was in the RSPCA, so she was a handy contact. And my job at the time was driving a paper delivery van, taking bulk newspapers to newsagents all round the area in the middle of the night. I was going into Bellingen to deliver papers to the newsagent one morning, and on my way back, midwinter, or it's always midwinter, these interesting ones, I saw a movement in the gutter at the side of the road, pulled over, and there's a very large male flying fox who was being very rude and warning me not to touch him. So I stripped my pullover off, never touched a bat before, never done anything, threw my pullover over him, wrapped him, and sat him on the front seat of the van. I had no idea till later how lucky I was, because I got back into the car, started driving, and every now and again this bat would stick his head from under the pullover, swear at me, and then pull his head back under the pullover. So at about 5 o'clock in the morning, I pulled up at my mother-in-law's, knocked on the door as you do, and said, "Hey Mum, I've got something for you," she being RSPCA and therefore obligated to take him. And this being years before we knew about bat-less virus and that you should have vaccines. But amazingly, neither of us was bitten, so I handed Flying Fox to my RSPCA mother-in-law and went home. So, first adult male flying fox rescue with no incident, and makes me cringe when I think about what I know now and handling large, stroppy male bats. I think he was just being kind to me.
I think you were very, very lucky. Maybe he hit his head.
Extremely lucky.
Maybe he really hit his head.
Well, he could certainly swear.
They often can.
He couldn't spread his wings because they were muffled with pullovers. But I used to watch the flying foxes fly into Bellingen when I was driving the van. And I went and walked on Bellingen Island. And my interest in Bellingen Island was sparked, would you believe, by a British naturalist by the name of David Bellamy.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody's seen David Bellamy, he's a large bear who stalks through things and booms, which sort of mimics my voice, I suppose. But he'd done an episode on Bellingen Island. Being a botanist, he was dealing with the tungivoi and the nettles and that sting you. But he kept being disrupted by poo falling on him from above, so he had some shots of the flying foxes above him. So I knew where to find them and went and looked at them. Then I joined wires to do some typing and visited a friend who had flying fox pups in care. And while she talked to some other people about wires business, she told me, yes, I could look at the pups on her era but I could not go near them because I was not rabies vaccinated and I was not to touch them. Well, a few minutes later, I was trying to work out how I was going to get 4 young flying foxes off my back where they could not be reached without anybody seeing that I had 4 small flying foxes on me. So after I'd stripped my shirt off in approved fashion, as I've discovered later, and run round and round her area, putting back one at a time, for some time I thought, perhaps I really should get into bats. So I did my training for bats, and the rest is history. I've been caring for flying foxes for 23 years, till very recently when I've got too old and feeble to really handle many.
You're not too old and feeble. So these little Velcros that you got stuck onto your back, on the shirt or your back, did they just reach out and climb onto you, or did you kind of encourage it?
I just sort of stood very close to the area to get a better look at them. You do realise I wear glasses and my sight's not that good. And I didn't realise, it must be admitted, how long their reach is, or how quickly when one climbs on you, the rest twig. And I did not realise how difficult it is to get 4 off you, because as soon as you put one back, the other 3 are back on you, and it's this constant swap. And it's been a problem I've had ever since, because I've always cared for multiple pups in every season.
Yes.
And it's always been this dash around the area, putting one on and then getting out of reach of the others while you put the second on, and so forth.
So, tell me, what's your first official rescue?
My first official rescue of a flying fox. Well, I had been trained, I had been vaccinated, I was all qualified to go out and rescue flying foxes. You have to understand there are very few bat carers in any area, and you have to do a rescue when you get the call. However, my history was that I was unemployed because I had just recovered from a stroke and several months in hospital. My balance was very poor. My first call to a rescue was a bat lying on a roof. So I rang ahead and asked, how high is the roof? Not very high, they said.
Never trust a mop
No.
with a distance.
Do you have a ladder that you can hold, say I, being terrified of ladders and heights? Yes, and the roof is not very high above the ground. So I get there. The back roof was not very high above the ground, but there was no access to it. The front roof was 2 stories high, and you then had to walk a roof beam marked by the line of nails, get on your belly and slide down onto the flat roof where the bat was. So I climb an extended ladder. Halfway up I thought, I wish my physios could see me now. Got to the top of the 2nd story, walked the beam marked by a line of roofing nails, got down. Somebody had climbed up and carried my cat carry cage behind me and passed it to me, and I find this large bat, horribly burned. He'd obviously come off electric power lines, and looking at me, and there was no way I could leave that bat. He was going to need euthanasia, but I could not ignore those eyes. So I put him in the cat carry cage, lay on my belly and handed him over the low part of the roof to somebody who'd climbed a ladder to take him, then went back and climbed down the double ladders. And my heart just leapt on my way to the vet to have that euthanized, because I thought, my physios would not have believed this. There was some doubt that I would ever walk again, and here I am climbing an extendable ladder to get a bat.
Awesome physio.
It was awesome physio, yes.
Awesome physio. Just doing stuff, better than going to a physiotherapist. Doing stuff is the best physio.
It is. I've seen some horrible things in my 20 plus years looking after bats. I've heard mass bats crying as they die of heat. I've seen bats disemboweled on aerials of cars where they've been caught. I think the most heartrending things are people who call in a bat in the evening after they've seen it stuck on barbed wire and they were to work that morning. But I've also had things that make my heart lift, like a bat that flies, and as it takes to the air, it wheezes on me to say goodbye.
Well,
and they're heart-lifting things.
I love to hard release a bat, but I love to see it pee as it goes. To lighten the load.
It is. So yes, I've
So
even
20, how many years?
I've 23 years.
23 years.
Yes. And I'm now no longer active with the bats, but I maintain my vaccination just in case somebody needs a hand with a stroppy bat or something.
Of course, you can't leave it alone.
No.
Who could?
And people do still come to my door and bring me bats because I've collected them from their orchards before or something. So I never shut up.
Right,
me.
okay.
Except when I'm concentrating, and then I want to hit anybody who makes any noise anywhere near me.
Ah.